Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Samurai Goddess. The goddess next door takes on kung fu killers in this action-packed martial arts Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Samurai Goddess in paperback and e-readers today. After watching the second episode of the CW's Black Lightning, I can appreciate how great Netflix's Luke Cage is. Because after you watch the second episode of Black Lightning, you'll clearly come to understand the difference between how white people present black people in media, like they do on the CW's Black Lightning, and how black people present themselves in media, like we did in Netflix's Luke Cage. And after taking a look at this second episode of Black Lightning, I could clearly see how white liberals view black people, because on that second episode, they literally went full SJW and breathed all sorts of brand new life into old stereotypes. Now, the second episode of Black Lightning revolved around Black Lightning going to shut down this Seahorse Hotel where these teenagers were being forced to prostitute for the 100 gang. Now, that entire storyline, as I think about it, was extremely creepy when you think about it, because here we have this street gang pushing not only prostitution, but pedophilia. And this is something that white liberals do because they have this view that black people are supposed to be into this whole pimping game. And that's what this whole storyline was all about. This La character was out here pimping these teenage girls, and this was supposed to be supposedly normal. But that's all the white liberals' view of black people. And what he's trying to do is repackage the old stereotype that black men are pimps and hustlers, and he's also trying to repackage the old stereotype that black girls are Jezebels. And this is something that has been perpetuated about black girls ever since Halle Berry won the Oscar back in 2002 for Monsters Ball. And what they're doing here is trying to repackage that old stereotype as a social norm on Black Lightning, trying to say that this gang is so powerful that they literally will take girls out of school and then pimp them. I'm sorry, that's not entertainment for me. That's really creepy as I see it. You're going to promote pedophilia as a social norm and then say it's prostitution. And moreover, what they're going to say is that this gang is so powerful that the girls are going to say that they're doing this on their own. I'm sorry, it just crosses a line. It's not good fantasy. It's not good entertainment. It's absolutely creepy, and I was completely disgusted by that entire storyline on that second episode of Black Lightning, because it was not appropriate for African American fantasy to have children presented that way in a story. Now, this whole thing goes on in this Black Lightning episode. You have Jefferson Pierce trying to talk to Lala, and then he gets beat up. And then later on, he goes on in this episode trying to shut this whole Seahorse Hotel down. And again, it's a creepy episode, and the story is really creepy. But there were other elements in this Black Lightning episode I also found quite troubling. And what I saw that was also quite troubling in this episode of Black Lightning was Greg Berlanti trying to promote his whole homosexual agenda. Now, everybody who watches a Greg Berlanti show knows that Greg Berlanti is a homosexual, and what he does is he tries to incorporate homosexuality in most of his shows and tries to promote it heavily as related to black characters. Now, on the CW's Arrow, you have Mr. Terrific, who was originally a heterosexual character, now being pushed as a homosexual character. Moreover, he's presented as a bumbling, stumbling idiot. Now, in the comics, Mr. Terrific is a heterosexual man. He's the world's third smartest man, and he's on the level of guys like Batman and Black Panther, and most people have great respect for Mr. Terrific, but they don't like this version presented. Now, in Black Lightning, they want to present one of his daughters as a lesbian, and this was one of those things that really turned me off, because I saw Greg Berlanti trying to push his homosexual agenda. Now, I know there are some comic fans who will say, oh, one of Black Lightning's daughters is a lesbian in the comics, but I really think if you're going to try to promote this as a so-called family show, you really don't need this in a family show. Now, that may offend some people out there, but as I believe it to be, when it comes down to fantasy and science fiction shows, there's a time and a place for things, and this isn't really the time and a place for things, because when it comes down to black audiences, as I've found out, many of them, when they saw those lesbians, automatically would have gotten turned off. And I got turned off when I saw that, and I said, that's not an element of the show I really want to watch, because when I see it presented on Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow, that was one of the reasons why I stopped watching Supergirl. That and all the constant feminism. And one of the reasons why I don't watch Legends of Tomorrow too much is because they continuously push this homosexual agenda on these Berlanti shows. It just turns me off to see them continuing to push this identity politics on these type of superhero shows, when all I want to see is good guys taking on the bad guys. And with Black Lightning, it looks like they're trying to push all this identity politics on the show, and it's really starting to bog down a show that already was struggling in the first place, because I did not like seeing the pimping. I did not like seeing the whole daughter with the angle again, because I see what they were trying to do, and later on in the episode, I saw something there that I really did not like seeing, and that was you're trying to not only say that this daughter is a lesbian, but you're also trying to masculinize this female by saying she has some sort of super strength. And again, this is all about trying to degrade the black female. And this is something that is done so they can elevate the image of the white female. They always present all these old negative stereotypes of black women in an effort to try to make the white woman appear more attractive. And that's what I saw a lot going on in this episode. And another thing I saw in this episode, with which really turned me off to this Black Lightning, again, was Black Lightning himself. Now, Jefferson Pierce, they're trying to make it like he's this good black man, but they're not really giving him any sort of depth or any sort of the substance that Luke Cage had. Luke Cage had all sorts of depth, layers, and personality, but Jefferson Pierce, he's not really coming across as a character with his own personality and his own voice. Like many SJW characters, when it comes down to Black Lightning, he comes across as a mouthpiece for Greg Berlanti, Salim Akil, and Mara Brock Akil, and in that order, because usually it looks like to me that Mara Brock Akil and Salim Akil write scripts, and then they have to go to Greg Berlanti for approval, and it has to push Greg Berlanti's narrative for black men, not the Akil's narrative for black men, or letting this character just be himself. So I'm not seeing Jefferson Pierce being Jefferson Pierce. I'm seeing Jefferson Pierce being this mouthpiece for what they believe a black man should be. Again, that's like I said, they're not characters in this show, because I listen to the dialogue for these characters, and it's not like Luke Cage where I'm hearing Luke's voice or Luke's personality coming across. I'm hearing people making speeches, I'm hearing people pontificating, I'm hearing them talk about old black history, but they're not incorporating it into the story. They're literally just mouthpieces for the writer. They're literally like Mary Sue's and Gary Stu's. They're not people telling their own story. And that's really another thing that annoys me. Now, the next thing that annoyed me about the second episode again was seeing Jefferson Pierce going back to that white tailor. This is something that really irritates me about this show, because here you have this black man who says he's going to go clean up his community, and he's literally fighting the people in his own community, but he's always going to this white man. And in some ways, that's coming across to me like a slave master who is going to, and he's like the house slave going to the white man, asking him how to do everything, and he doesn't know how to do anything on his own. Now, one of the things that I really liked about Netflix's Luke Cage is that Netflix's Luke Cage always showed Luke having an interaction with the community, and he was always a friend to the people in the community. He was always talking to Pop and trying to get advice from Pop and the older men in the community. And even when he was with the Asian people who worked in a Chinese restaurant, he had a relationship with all the people in the community, all the people in the neighborhood, and he was working with the people in the community. With this Jefferson Pierce, again, it feels like SJWs and white liberals, where they are on the outside looking in, and Jefferson Pierce is like this outsider, like this SJW. He's going to come into this community. He knows nothing about the people who are there. He knows nothing about what's going on. He knows nothing about the politics, and he's going to, quote unquote, clean up the black community. That's an SJW view of cleaning up the black community, because it seems like he's detached from the black community. This is another problem I have with the Jefferson Pierce character when I compare him to Luke Cage. He just feels like he has this mission, and he's only on this mission for his daughters. That's the way it was in the first episode. He was only on the mission for the daughters, and they addressed it somewhat in this episode where they said, "Oh, are you only here for your daughters, or are you here for other people?" And it really doesn't feel like he's really there for other people as you watch this episode. You really don't feel like he's a part of the community or concerned. Now, Luke Cage was like the invisible man. He was observing, he was watching, and that's why he had the Ralph Ellison classic novel in his hand, because he understood the whole concept of an invisible man. And then him becoming visible was about him helping out people in the community and helping it from the most dangerous people in the community, which are people like your black pastors, your black politicians, and many of your so-called entrepreneur hustlers like Cottonmouth was. Those were the greatest threat to the community, and Luke Cage did a great job of showing us not only those bad guys, but showing us some balance. When I look at Black Lightning, it looks like, oh, it's a black guy, but it looks like he's the white people's black guy, and it looks like he's going against the people in the neighborhood, and he's doing the bidding of whoever the white people send him to. That's what it feels like when you watch an episode of Black Lightning. It doesn't feel like he has any connection to any of the people there. Because I watched that episode and he's sitting there, and one of the black females, the single mother, comes to him asking for help, and he literally is so disconnected that she feels like she can't get any help. And then she goes up to this Lala character and confronts him, and she gets shot while they're playing Al Green. Now, everybody who knows Al Green music knows it's love song music, and to show this guy cold-heartedly shooting a black woman, that was another troubling thing to me, because again, they not only breathed brand new life in the old Sapphire stereotype, but they also showed this guy just having just complete coldness to kill a mother. And again, that's again more SJW cringe as it relates to the whole presenting a black man as a pimp. That was another troubling picture that was in this episode. This whole episode, I just had serious, deep issues with it because it wasn't a positive presentation of black people. Now, you'll have people like Shawn King talking about this is supposed to be one of those great series and things that are supposed to be a major event, but this is not a major event to me. As a guy who is 44 years old, I grew up with a major event back in 1984. It was called The Cosby Show. And The Cosby Show was an event because here we saw a working class black family, a middle class black family, a functional black family. What I saw in Black Lightning was nowhere near the level of Luke Cage, nor was it on the level of The Cosby Show. What was in that second episode was old stereotypes from old shows like Good Times and old blaxploitation movies, and they weren't even done well. They were just done extremely poorly, and all they did was present old stereotypes as related to black people, and it showed, sort of a divide in between Jefferson Pierce and his own community and his relationship with his own community. It showed that Black Lightning is not really a protector of the community. It shows that he had real serious issues with connecting with the community. And the reason why the character has such problems is because he is the white person's view of black. He is the white person's view of a black community. He is a white person's view of the black experience. And when you get a person who is the white person's view of the black experience and a white person's view of black, you're not getting a rich, authentic picture of blackness. When I looked at Netflix's Luke Cage, it was literally like going back to Harlem back when I was a little kid. It was showing me that black on black love, that black community coming together, those black people being a community, and we got to know people in the community. And when people died in Netflix's Luke Cage, you really felt it. When you felt things in Luke Cage, because there was a heart to the material, there was a soul to the material, the way they put the music in there, everything came to life to give you a almost real life experience. I mean, I could see things that literally were drawn from things that I knew growing up as a kid, who went to go visit Harlem when my father would take me for haircuts, and then they go to visit members of my family, or places like 145th Street when my dad would take me to McDonald's. And I could look at Luke Cage and say, look, I know that neighborhood. I know people like that. But when I look at Black Lightning, I don't see that. I don't see, people like myself, people from my community, people that I knew, or experiences that I knew. And that's why I say it's a white person's view of black. It comes from the outside looking in. There's no real heart to it. There's no soul to it. All Black Lightning is that he's black on the outside, but he's not coming from the black experience. He's not coming from the black community, and it just felt really detached. And then it looked like all they were trying to do was push Greg Berlanti's narrative for black people throughout this show, and that really turned me off. Now, this other thing that really turned me off, again, relates to Jefferson Pierce. They show you this Jefferson Pierce character, and one of the things that really turned me off is that he's still chasing his ex-wife. Now, I know a lot of guys, they have feelings for women when they have had relationships break up with them, but what they had Jefferson Pierce doing on this show was simping. I mean, and what's worse about it was he was simping on his ex-wife. He was literally trying to get her back and trying to get back to some period in time. Now, when it comes down to people who write male characters like myself and can develop male characters, you know that once you have broken up with an ex, yes, you have your feelings, but you know how to navigate through your feelings. A man knows how to do that, and a black man knows how to do that because he knows if he doesn't navigate through his feelings, he's going to get jammed up. And when I'm looking at this Jefferson Pierce and the way he was simping on his ex-wife, that was sad to watch. It just showed me, again, Greg Berlanti has serious issues with black men. He clearly has not had experiences with black men, and he doesn't know how we deal with our feelings in relationships. When it comes down to guys who have kids with a mother, yeah, they'll be in the room with that woman. They'll be talking to her. They'll be nice to her. But there is not anything going to go beyond that. They're not going to try to reconcile that because they know it's over and they're going to do what's in the best interest of their kids. I know this from personal experience because I know how my mother and father interacted. And I could draw on that, and I could clearly see that Berlanti's writers and the Achilles didn't know how to do that as related to the story. They have this guy, oh, he's simping on her, he's feeling bad, he's looking for her to lean on him, and that really made the character look weak. That and him and pandering to this white person really makes the Jefferson Pierce character look really weak. He does not look like a guy who is ready to be a hero. Now, Luke Cage, he had his issues, but Luke Cage looked like he was dedicated and ready to fighting for people and standing up for people. And he had more confidence, as I see with Jefferson Pierce. Jefferson Pierce is presented as this educated, professional black man, but he just doesn't really have any heart or any depth or any substance. Again, he's like what the white liberals want to see as regarded to this so-called good black, but we don't see anything that makes him human to us. He looks like a character who is their idea of what good black man is, but he is not somebody who comes from the black experience or black culture. Now, I look at that character again, he looks like a very hollow character and a very shallow character, and the whole episode, that was a big problem with this episode. Them presenting these old stereotypes and then not presenting any sort of depth to it. Now, when I look at Luke Cage, they presented so much depth and so much heart. I mean, those first 6 episodes, they were masterful. I mean, the way they were executed and done, it was literally like taking a trip to Harlem, literally coming into the neighborhood, seeing the people, getting to know the community. I mean, it was coming to life. And I don't see Black Lightning coming to life. And this is why I have serious issues with this show. For this to be African American fantasy, I believe in 2018 we need to do better than what we have in Black Lightning, because what's presented in the first 2 episodes of Black Lightning really reminds me of 1994's Mantis. Now, in 1994, it was okay to have a black guy who was going out and taking on a street gang because we didn't have any black superheroes on screen at the time. But here we are in 2018. We've had all these superhero movies like Iron Man, Captain America, The Avengers, and Captain America Civil War, which featured 3 black superheroes in a movie. And it's time to do better than just having a black guy on screen. This is why I talk about when I talk about wanting more as related to African American fantasy and science fiction. And when it comes down to Black Lightning, they aren't giving us more story, they aren't giving us more characters, they aren't giving us more depth, they aren't giving us more substance. They're just giving us a generic, by the numbers show that came from 1994 And it literally is almost the same as Mantis, because Mantis was a guy in a suit that fired electrical bolts and things like that. And Black Lightning is a guy in a suit who fires electrical bolts and things like that. And to say that we've gone 25 years in time and nothing has evolved, that's what's really sad as related to the presentation of African American fantasy and science fiction, that we still have a black superhero on TV taking on street gangs when guys like me are out here writing stories where I have an Egyptian goddess taking on vampires, demons, monsters, cyber goddesses, and making all sorts of imaginary concepts that go beyond the whole street gang thing, because ISIS hasn't taken on a street gang in the almost 15 years that she's been in print. And I have characters like John Haynes taking on Lucifer and his Legion, and I have Eaststeam taking on characters like demons and monsters, and even Morgan Le Fay. And that shows how little imagination the Achilles had as related to this show. Yes, they are trying to stay true to the source material, but as I see it, this gang, the 100, is no real challenge for Black Lightning. He really feels disconnected from them. There's no real relationship there like there was with Luke Cage, with Cottonmouth and Mariah, and even Diamondback. There was a relationship there. It just feels like stuff is here, good guy is here, obstacle here, and it feels like very formulaic and robotic. There doesn't feel like there's any sort of real, again, no depth there to connect the reader or the viewer to the experience. I mean, when I look at Black Lightning, stuff is happening, but there's no reason to care about it because the writers are so caught up in pushing their agenda that they're forgetting that when you tell a story, you have to have a moral message, you have to have a theme, and things have to come together in a way that show us a reason to care. When I look at Black Lightning, you have this so-called good black man, but he's just so bland that there's nothing there to really connect you to him. And then he's going out on these missions, and he has to go to this white man for advice before he goes to these missions, and that really sours everything. And then when he takes on the bad guys, he's only taking on black bad guys. And that's another thing that turns me off about Black Lightning, is that they always show the bad guys as these gangsters and thugs. And what I liked about Luke Cage was that there was more variety to the bad guys, and we saw the subtle politics transpiring around us with Mariah and Cottonmouth. And we also saw that the street hoods were not just the only threat. We saw varied threats, and we saw them all as credible because they all had direct relationships to Luke Cage. We don't really see that with Jefferson Pierce. He just looks like a guy who's out of place and he's disconnected. And his story with his daughters just feels like some stuff just tacked on for Greg Berlanti's agenda. The whole show feels uneven, and the second episode, it really was a complete mess. It was a complete SJW mess because it felt like they were pushing agendas, identity politics, and other things, but they really weren't trying to come together to tell you a rock solid story. When it came down to this Black Lightning, I'm starting to have less and less faith with it because 2 episodes in, and I'm not seeing a character to care about. I'm not seeing a story with characters that feel like people. They look like figures and ideas regarding black people. And it's looking, more like the white man's view of black and not our version of black. And what I wanted to see with a black superhero show was a show that showed our experiences, our values, our culture. And I also wanted to see fantasy that showed how much we've evolved since Mantis came on back in 1994. I wanted to see a lot more as related to things, and I'm not seeing it. And when I look at this show, only thing that makes Black Lightning so-called must-see TV for people like Shawn King is the fact that you have a black man on screen. But for me, I need a lot more than just having a black character on screen. I want to see some character to those people on that black superhero show that show me somebody there that I can get into and somebody I can care about and get excited about, like I do when I write my stories, like The Temptation of John Haynes, or ISIS series stories like ISIS Bride of Dracula. Now, if you want to try some of my action-packed African-American fantasy fiction, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com And if you want to help me make more videos and pay for book covers, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.